What's up, everybody? This is Mark Monroe, and this is, of course, a breakdown. We got a lot to get into today. For example, Nvidia's earnings, and on top of that, we got to talk about Google I/O. We got to talk about Microsoft, and on top of that, Apple's not that far away around the corner. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We got a lot to wrap up into this video. So without further ado, let's get to it. Cue that intro. Okay, so where do we start? So let's start off with Nvidia because that's the first thing that you're probably going to be watching when you see this video. So Nvidia had a blockbuster earnings beat. Revenue was up 262% over year. And on top of that, they announced a 10-for-1 stock split, if I'm correct. And so what is it that we saw here? We definitely saw chip sales continue to keep going, especially on the enterprise cloud. We're starting to see more of that than we're hearing about the consumer sales. So that's going to be very interesting, especially since we're expected to see the new GPUs for the commercial side coming out later on this year. But NVIDIA has really been doubling down within its data center and enterprise cloud, as well as its other services in which it is providing. But it's really the Blackwell that a lot of those orders are really starting to pile up on. If you don't remember, I spoke about NVIDIA doing its last event, which was GTC, where they talked about some of their new AI infrastructure that was leaps and bounds upgrade over the previous edition. So we're starting to see a lot of companies that are now making their orders now as we get prepared for going into late 2024, but really the 2025 numbers. And so I think that that's ultimately where investors are really parking right now looking at over the next 9 months, looking at those orders really being up. And that's where you see these astronomical percentage gains over a period of time for its earnings as it pertains to sales. Now, of course, NVIDIA, we don't really have to worry about CapEx spending because their profit margins are pretty solid. They remain stabilized. So all in all, great quarter for NVIDIA, and I expect nothing but the best for the company moving forward as it pertains to some of the other enterprise services that they're going to provide, especially as we start seeing other service providers jump on the bandwagon as it pertains to AI. You know, the typical thing that we hear is we're incorporating more AI into our infrastructure. Well, part of that is they're making investments. Thing to take into consideration though, follow the money as it pertains to who's financing a lot of these things, because with those financing deals, especially in a high cost of capital market, that's a pretty solid interest rate return for the bank in which that is ultimately doing a lot of those financing of deals. There's your homework there for that one. All right, so let's get into the next one. Let's talk about Google I/O. Now, Google I/O and Microsoft are not shying away from the AI race either. So Google had its I/O event, which is pretty much its developers conference. We've talked about this before here in the Come Up series, where we're finding out some of the new things in which that they're bringing out, some of the iterations that they're improving on, but they're really doubling down on the consumer market within the phone space, as well as doubling down with its Gemini platform for its developer community and other related tasks. Where I see this going, I definitely see a reinvigoration of the Google Drive platform, of course, your Google Workspace, aka Gmail. I think I see that across the entire board where they start incorporating those AI services along with cloud infrastructure to try to catch up with Amazon AWS and Microsoft Azure. It's been a very rocky road for Google, especially since like Sundar Pichai has been taking hits. And on top of that, they've had massive amounts of layoffs due to the uprising and recruitment that they did during the pandemic. So now it's ultimately trying to get to a form of stabilization, as well as trying to turn some of those products that they bring out. They're trying to make them profitable, or trying to at least show that they can actually become profitable spinouts and create new verticals for the company Alphabet. So this is very interesting to pay attention to. I think that we should probably also start seeing exactly how this really plays out, and not only just in their Android division, but also, like I said, the enterprise. This year is all about enterprise cloud across all tech companies. Of course, they're going to have their consumer related products, but the high margin items is really going to be those enterprise sales. So I'd be paying attention to Google Cloud and YouTube services and how does AI fit into those realms alongside with can they reinvigorate the good old faithful Google search. I think that they can, but I definitely think it's going to take some time, but ultimately it's Google. They're going to figure it out. It's a team, it's a company of engineers, and the question is not can they build the product, but more so in the sense that can they just like once they build the product, can they tone it down on the engineering side and then let the business development people step in and ultimately surround it around a solid business ecosystem? That's the main thing that really plagues Google. Okay, now let's talk about an ad. No. All right. So we're going to take a quick little ad break here. And this is very like out of the blue, but there's two things that I want to shout out. First things first, where are you going to be at July 19th through the 21st? If you're not here in Seattle, then you're missing it. This is like the creme de la creme, the come up of all come ups, as I have said before. This is going to be the event of all events, and it's our first one. So, what am I talking about? We are hosting a Tech Innovation and Wealth Summit. And what does that mean? If you're an investor and trader, there's something for you. If you're a startup entrepreneur as well as a person looking to invest in things on the private market, there's definitely something for you. Why? Because many of you know me, some of you know me as Mark Monroe, the guy in investments, stocks, options, those things. And then there's a few of you that know about me in the startup world. Well, those two worlds are going to come together and merge. And why? Because I strongly believe that the reason why a lot of times that you like my insight is because of the fact of the information that I bring on both sides of the table. So I felt like I would be remiss not to bring those things to you. So who's going to be in the building? You may see Mark Mahaney from Evercore ISI. You might see maybe even Dan Ives make a cameo pop up. And then on top of that, on the VC side, you may have some of my friends over at A16Z, as well as some of the cousins that you may have already known, and many others that you have yet to even meet. I'm really excited about the event. I know that Joel Lennon is excited, so be on the lookout for that. Okay, and second, who's our sponsor? Of course, shout outs to Barchart because they help make a lot of the things possible as it pertains to the trading analysis for me. And so as I'm going into my last year as an active trader, I definitely want to shout them out, and it's an amazing platform that you should definitely check out. They provide you a lot of resources and a lot of tools for free, but if you want to step your game up even further, they have some pretty dope premium tools. And since I use the platform to the platform that it is today, light years difference. So I hope that it helps you in your trading journey. Okay, now that we got that ad stuff out of the way, all right, let's get back to it. So let's talk about Microsoft. Microsoft had also recently spoke about its devices and how they're bringing neural networks and Copilot throughout Windows. Now, anybody who saw this, we definitely saw this. I mean, of course, it was about time for Microsoft to have a refresh to its product devices, one, and then two, it was about time that they also start showing the pathway of incorporating AI neural network devices into those same devices, such as the Surface Pro and the Surface Laptop. They're very interesting devices, and they're really taking some significant jabs towards Apple's MacBook. I wonder what Apple is going to do at its next MacBook event, because the interesting thing is that Apple spoke about the M4 chip, except normally they release the M4 chip in their MacBook lineup, but they did something that was completely different. They released the M4 chip in the iPad Pro series. So I'd be on the watch for what does Apple have up its potential sleeve. Could we be seeing one more thing? Could we be seeing something new hit the table? Probably not. We probably may be just seeing some new iterations, but also seeing more powerful devices and AI being incorporated finally into Apple. But back to Microsoft. The reason why it's interesting for Microsoft is because of the fact that Microsoft, I think, is preparing to also go into the chip space even further. Now, a lot of times we talk about like Nvidia, we talk about the Intels of the world, and we talk about the AMDs of the world. And those companies are great. They are fantastic. But there's just one little problem. The problem is that essentially that sooner or later the major players are going to want to have more ownership towards their own ecosystems. It doesn't mean that they're not going to play with Nvidia or AMD, but it just means that essentially if they're going to increase their profit margins and everything else, You can't give that profit margin away to someone else. So what are you going to do? You're going to come up with more stuff. So as we see, Google has its TensorFlow chips, which is their quantum chips that they're using. And now they're going into generative AI very hard, like, for example, video. So to combat what OpenAI is doing on generative AI video. So that could get interesting, especially given that you have the YouTube platform. And then on top of that, you have Microsoft and its generative AI as it pertains to gaming. That's interesting. And then on top of that, as it pertains to just the overall Windows ecosystem where you can talk to the AI and the AI can like literally learn based upon what it's seeing on your screen. So this AI race is not really going anywhere. If anything, we're going to get to a place of stabilization. And then after we get to the stabilization, then we'll probably hit our next mark. But I think that after we hit that stabilization, we're going to have to see a little bit of a flush within the space as well, because there's a lot of AI companies out there that are saying that they're doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that, aka shout outs to the Rabbit device, which was ultimately crap. I thought about doing a review on that one, but then I was just like, when I took a further look at that device, I was just like, nah, you guys deserve so much more. You deserve much better than that. And shout outs to MKBHD for doing a better review than I could have ever done. He did it justice, and a lot of the points that he hit on, I completely agree with. If you haven't seen it, I'll probably link it in the description down below. But again, now that we've seen that Google has done its thing towards AI, Nvidia is still just Nvidia. Nvidia is just being Nvidia. The next thing that I'm really paying attention to is, what is Apple going to do? Because now Apple, you're on the clock. And it's not to say that Apple's not going to be going anywhere or anything like that. Apple is still going to be Apple, the devices that ultimately like power a lot of the things, in which that has become a part of the major lexicon of tech, not just in the people, but tech. So I don't think that they're going anywhere. I just think that they need to change it up. And so WWDC is going to be probably the most watched event as it pertains to, has Apple woken up and realize that they need to, throw in a little bit of the innovation hat and start adding some different types of iterations, even if they're incremental within the software ecosystem of iOS, iPad OS, and Mac OS. Those are proprietary techs, so of course, those are the places where I would probably start as it pertains to the tech, and then ultimately work my way to the hardware devices. Now, of course, if they're already talking about M4, I'm probably sure that we're going to be talking about some form of neural network or neural AI, though of course, knowing Apple, they don't really use the same buzzwords as everybody else. They come up with X amount of patents in which that they say it differently, but it still means the same thing. So I'm really excited to see what comes out about that. I mean, of course, all eyes are on the software. And then also all eyes are definitely going to be, okay, well, what else are you working on? Even if you're not releasing it this year, what's coming out in 2025? So those are the things to pay attention to. Now, if you've been following the Come Up series and you're like, hey, Mark, where's the new SIPs and everything else? You don't need them anymore. The reason why is because those same SIPs, I mean, they're filling you up for sure. I mean, your glass should be full if you're on the chips. If you went in on the chips, then honestly, kudos to you. If you went in on TQQQ or also hedged against it with the SQQQ, then good for you. So again, there's something for everybody as it pertains to benchmarks. So I'm really, really excited for what is coming about. I'm sorry if you hear potentially Butter walking in the background because he wants attention. But I hope that this was good for you. Until next time, I'm Mark Monroe. I got a lot to get into because I got to prepare for July 19th through the 21st. Hope to see y'all there. And this has been your Come Up. I'll see you in the next one. Peace, y'all.